All right, guys, day two of the NCAA tournament is finished. And, guys, the two greatest sports days, in my opinion, this Thursday and Friday, the first round of the NCAA tournament, they're gone. And it's sad to see these days gone because there's just so much basketball. And listen, I was wrong. Last night after the first day, I said, I expect a lot more chaos today, more and more upsets, bigger upsets, and it just didn't happen, guys. And this is kind of 2 years in a row where there haven't been any like major upsets. Yes, a 12 over a 5 is a big upset, but I'm talking about like, a 14 over a 3 or a 15 over a 2, like those big time upsets. It's kind of 2 years in a row where those things have not happened. Yes, there have been some upsets, but nothing like unbelievably shocking. Like some people were predicting High Point to beat Wisconsin yesterday. Um, but in years past, there's been upsets that nobody saw coming, and it just hasn't been happening. And maybe it's the new era of college basketball with NIL and the transfer portal. Maybe it is. Maybe it's killed the Cinderella or killed these upsets like this. I'm not willing to say that these upsets are done. In future years, I think we're going to see some. I really thought there'd be more this year, kind of get back to that, but it just hasn't really happened. Again, there's been a couple of upsets, but nothing just like unbelievably shocking, like we've seen in many years past. It just seems like there were just, in years past, there was just always upsets and nobody was expecting. So um, here's the thing though, like, these lower seeds, I felt like fought really, really hard and just could not get over the hump in so many of these games. Like just watching Furman and UConn, and Furman was right there with UConn, just could not get over the hump and just, you know, let Terrace Reed destroy them pretty much. Hofstra was beating Alabama by 10, but, Alabama, came back and beat them by 20, and it was much closer than that. Siena, we talked about yesterday with Duke, was beating them by 13, Siena was, and, ended up losing that game. It seems like a lot of these lower seeds fought really tough, but like couldn't close the deal. Gonzaga, struggled with Kennesaw State for a while. It's just, it just seems like these teams are just too much. The higher level teams are just too much for these mid majors, and we just didn't see many upsets today at all. But guys, there were like, although there wasn't a ton of upsets, there were still some really, really good basketball games. Um, like I, talking about these upsets, Wright State was really close with Virginia the whole game until the very end. But guys, I think the game of the day was Kentucky and Santa Clara. And I think that was the first game of the day. It was just insane, man. I mean, Santa Clara and Kentucky back and forth. Lead was changing. It looks like Kentucky was going to run away with it at a time. I think they got up by like 7 or something was their biggest lead. And then, Santa Clara just kept storming back. Looked like Santa Clara was going to win. Especially there at the end, they hit a three with 2 seconds left to go up by three. But then Otega Owe, took a shot and like right after half court to send it to OT. Just probably the shot of the tournament. It's going to be definitely the shot of the tournament so far. Just an awesome, awesome finish. That's what March Madness is all about. That was a really, really great game. Hats off to both of those teams for fighting. Sad to see Santa Clara lose that way. But man, that was an awesome, awesome game right there. And I know there's going to be a lot of talk about, the jump ball that wasn't called at the end of the game. I didn't think it was a jump ball personally, and that gave Kentucky the possession to tie it up, with Santa Clara. And then Santa Clara did hit that three, and then, Otega Owe sent it to overtime with his three. But I know some people will say, Dalton was saying that was definitely a jump ball, and it would have been Santa Clara's ball, which probably would have put Kentucky in a tough spot to kind of tie that game up towards the end of the regulation. And I know that, after Santa Clara hit that big shot, the coach was trying to call a timeout, and the refs didn't give it to him. I know in the heat of the moment in the game, it's, sometimes those things are missed and, the calls aren't made there. So, anyways, um, really, really awesome game today between those two teams. I'm trying to just look down here at these other games that happened today. Villanova and Utah State was a solid game. At a time, I think Villanova was up by 10, and Utah State ended up winning by 10. They were really impressive there in that second half, and I picked Utah State to win. I just thought they were the better team overall this year. I didn't really think Villanova did all that much this year, but I could have seen Villanova winning the game, but I just thought Utah State would do it, and they were impressive. And so I don't know if they have much of a shot versus Arizona, but we're gonna see. Um, there wasn't a ton of other really good games. A lot of the games were blowouts here. UCLA versus UCF was another solid one. UCLA was pretty much up the entire game, but UCF hung around and ended up only losing by 4. They made some big shots down the stretch, and UCLA did what they needed to do to advance. And UCLA versus UConn in the second round would be a really interesting game. Um, Iowa Clemson was another game just like that, where Iowa was up pretty much the whole game, but Clemson kept closing the gap and sticking around, and they only lost by 6. But Iowa, I think, will put up a fight against Florida. That's going to be an interesting matchup in the second round. Again, not too much shocking here, in this second day. I really expected more. I will say this: Tennessee obliterated Miami, Ohio, and this was really the first, I think, high level opponent. Look, they did impress me that they beat SMU. I didn't even expect them to do that. I don't think SMU's all that great, but still, they did beat them, so they did beat a power conference opponent. But when they really leveled up the competition, they got handled. They really did. They're just not on par with these, higher level teams, major conference teams. So Tennessee just, I mean, beat them like a drum from the beginning of the game. So, um, you know, good job, great season for Miami, Ohio, but it just was never going to be enough to make any type of run, in my opinion, and it didn't happen. So, um, look, I'm very impressed by the SEC. You look down here. There's 32 teams left now, and out of these 32 teams, you got Arkansas, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas A&M at 6, Vanderbilt 7, Florida 8. Um, so you got 8 SEC teams, and I think SEC only has lost 2 games. Missouri lost today. Um, Missouri lost today to Miami, and yesterday Georgia got handled by St. Louis. But other than that, all these other teams have won, and so it's been a really impressive run by the SEC here. And I think the Big 12 has also had a pretty good run here too. So some of these bigger conferences have done really, really well here, but the SEC has really, really been impressive, and really in a lot of these games have been dominant, and kind of showing some, the strength of this conference. So curious to see how it plays out in the second round here. Guys, there's some really good matchups here in the second round. And man, that St. John's Kansas matchup, I think, is one of the best matchups that we've got. The 5 versus 4 there. That is going to be an awesome game. St. John's handled Northern Iowa, and Kansas beat Cal Baptist. They made it a little bit interesting, Cal Baptist, but it wasn't really close. Looking down here, I think Louisville, Michigan State could also be a really good game. An awesome, awesome, program matchup there, and the same with St. John's and Kansas. But Louisville, Michigan State have both, won championships this century, and have really good programs. So really interested to see how that plays out. The style is kind of contrasting there. I feel like Louisville's more offensive minded, Michigan State more defensive minded. Um, I think Nebraska and Vanderbilt is an awesome matchup too. Another 5-4. These 5-4 matchups are awesome. Vanderbilt, Nebraska, I think is a really, really good one. I'm really curious to see how that's going to play out. I think I picked Vandy in that, so I'm gonna ride with them. I think they're gonna win that game. Tennessee, Virginia is also intriguing. I think Tennessee can clip Virginia on Sunday. That's going to be a really good matchup. Kind of similar teams, defensive minded teams. I think that's going to be a low scoring game there. Alabama, Texas Tech, both missing players, JT Toppin out for Texas Tech, Aiden Holloway out for Alabama. No excuses, right? Curious to see how that one plays. Two high level offenses, two high level guards, and Philon from LeBaron Philon from Alabama, Christian Anderson from Texas Tech. It's going to be really interesting to see how that one plays out. Um, I think the matchup, like if I were to highlight maybe a matchup to watch for an upset, I actually picked this at the beginning of my bracket, like what original bracket. I picked UCLA over UConn in this second round, and I could see that happening. Furman hung with UConn this whole game, and UCLA's been playing have been on kind of a good run here towards the end of the season, and they got some really good players. If they can get Bilodeau back, um, for that game, I think that will really help them. But either way, I think UCLA can pose some problems for UConn and get the upset. I also would say Florida and Iowa. Iowa, hung with Michigan, almost beat Michigan. They did beat Nebraska this year. They've had some solid wins. They handled Clemson. It's only a 6 point game, but they really handled Clemson the whole game. They have some really good players like Bennett Sturts. That dude is a stud. And so, if there was a one seed that I'd expect to lose before the Sweet 16, it'd be Florida. So watch out for that. Duke versus TCU is also intriguing, considering their struggles against Siena. Duke's struggles, and TCU, they've had some impressive wins this year, including beating Florida. So watch out for that game as well. But I think the upset to watch for is UCLA over UConn and Iowa over Florida. We'll see how those play out here, but man, what a great weekend it's been so far. We still got some great games coming. So hope you're enjoying this March Madness. Take care. God bless.